So we've reached the end of section 12 and we've implemented ASP.NET Core identity in our application, or at least the basics of it. And the learning goals for this particular section were to install and configure ASP.NET Core identity. We've taken a look at JWT token authentication, which is the method we're using to allow users to authenticate to our API. A very commonly used method of authenticating to an API because we don't have a session with our API when we're making requests to API endpoints. As soon as we've received the data back from the API, our client is effectively disconnected from our API. So we can't remember the user login state when we're using an API. We have to use something like a JWT so that we can send that token with every request to the API, and that's how we maintain our login status with our API. So we've added login and register methods to allow users to sign up and log in, and we've added authentication to our endpoints. So other than the API account controller, everything in our application now requires authenticated requests to retrieve the data. So there's always questions related to security, I find, on any course that I released. And typically, students are worried about security even at this stage of development. And one of the concerns might be the length of time that our token is valid for. 7 days, this is insecure. Well, our token at the moment is valid for 7 days, and in fact, we're not even checking the token expiry as a token validation parameter, so effectively, our token could be said to be valid forever. Our server isn't going to check the expiry to see if a token is still valid at this point, and this is something that we address later on. We're going to take a look at refresh tokens so we can reduce the amount of time our token lives for, and we can reduce it to say 10 minutes or something, and as that time expires then we can refresh the token so long as our user is still using our application. But that's for later. We're not interested in bulletproof security, and there's no such thing, by the way, as an uncrackable system. Everything can be cracked. It's just the steps you take to make it as difficult as possible. Same as your car. You might have a car with no car alarm, but adding a car alarm might make it more difficult. Other car manufacturers add increasingly good security systems to cars, but there's no such thing as an unstealable car. A car thief with the right tools and skills would be able to get in and steal any car. Same goes for applications, but there are levels of security you can go to, and we will look at securing our application better than we're doing it right now. But that's for later. We're not publishing our application right now. We're still working on it. Another question that comes up a lot is that we are sending the token over the network with every request. This can be retrieved by a man-in-the-middle attack. And for sure, at the moment we're using HTTP, so all of our network requests are going in clear text. And yes, if somebody was monitoring our network traffic, which is difficult because we're just running our application over localhost, so they would technically need to be a man in the middle inside your computer right now. And yes, technically that would be the case, but in production we don't use HTTP, we use HTTPS, which is a requirement if you're asking users for usernames and passwords, because they are also sent in clear text at the moment as well. So the header and the payload are weaknesses if we do not use SSL to protect our network requests. But in production, we do use that, which means the headers and the payload are encrypted. And SSL is a secure and mature technology to protect network traffic from going to the client to the server. And that's what we'll be using. And what we'll take a look at next is the client side of this. We're going to configure this on our client so that we can log in and register users and authenticate our requests as well.